Voter apathy and violence recorded as Independent National Electoral Commission (INEC) conducts supplementary elections in 24 states across the country. INEC and EFCC appoint 18 lawyers to prosecute electoral offenders. Nigeria's inflation rate rises to 22.04% in March 2023 compared to 21.91% in February. On the foreign scene, fighting erupts between armed factions in Sudan amidst power struggle between army and paramilitaries. Good evening. This is News at 7 on Western Spring Television. My name is Damilola Raphael. The Independent National Electoral Commission (INEC) today conducted supplementary elections for 2 governorship seats and 93 legislative seats across 24 states of the Federation. INEC had earlier said elections will hold in a total of 2,660 polling units across 185 local governments, except for the Enugu East Senatorial seat and Esan North, Esan South, Iguabe Federal Constituency. Others were rolled over from the February 25th and March 18th elections. The elections are holding in areas where they were previously suspended due to reasons including violence and the margin of lead principle, a situation where the votes margin between the winner and the first runner-up is less than the cancelled votes. In the Adamawa governorship poll, the incumbent Ahmadu Fintiri of the People's Democratic Party, PDP, polled 421,524 votes, while the All Progressives Congress, APC candidate, Senator Aishatu Dahiru, scored 390,275 votes. However, INEC State Coalition Officer Professor Mohamedou Mele of the University of Maiduguri declared the election inconclusive due to the margin of votes. Similarly, in Kebbi, the APC polled 388,258 votes as against the PDP's 342,980 votes, leading the INEC returning officer in the governorship election, Professor Yusuf Saidu, to declare the election inconclusive. He said violence, destruction of election materials, disruption of electoral proceedings, and overvoting played a role in the decision. There were also supplementary elections for 5 senatorial seats: Kebbi North, Sokoto East, Sokoto North, Sokoto South, and Zamfara Central. In Imo State, hoodlums guided by suspected armed security men disrupted and snatched the ballot box at a hall in the Isu local government area of the state. Reports said about 5 thugs invaded the polling unit as voting commenced today. The thugs were said to have invaded the area despite the heavy presence of security men. Voters earlier expressed fears over the security armored vehicle patrolling the area before the snatching of the box. In a similar development, voting has been disrupted at Ward 4, polling unit 5 of Soro in the Kana local government area of Rivers State. Initially, voting was going on smoothly, but there was a disagreement between the party agents of the Social Democratic Party, SDP, and the People's Democratic Party, PDP. While the cause of the commotion was unclear, the ad hoc staff of the Independent National Electoral Commission left the scene abruptly and took with them the result sheets, Beavers machines, ballot boxes, and ballot papers, but left the voting cubicle behind. One of the voters alleged that votes were neither counted nor the result sheets signed before the INEC official left. Similarly, hoodlums reportedly disrupted the supplementary election taking place in 9 political wards in the Kankara local government area of Katsina State. INEC is conducting the State House of Assembly supplementary elections in 3 State House of Assembly seats, which include Kankara, Korofi, and Kankia. In Ebonyi State, voter apathy trailed today's supplementary election conducted by the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC. The supplementary elections took place in some constituencies in the 7 affected local government areas. The election is being conducted in Ikwo to elect the representative for the Ikwo North constituency in the Ebonyi House of Assembly. INEC declared the elections inconclusive in the areas due to violence and irregularities. Turning to Yobe State, the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, has declared Ibrahim Bumai as the duly elected senator representing Yobe South Senatorial District. Announcing the results today at the Federal College of Education, Potiskum, the returning officer, Abacha Melemi, says Bumai of the All Progressives Congress, APC, polled 69,596 votes to defeat his closest opponent of the People's Democratic Party, PDP, Halilu Mazagane, who polled 68,885 votes. INEC had earlier declared the election in the zone inconclusive, resulting from overvoting at Manawachi polling unit in the Fika local government area of the state. Ahmed Ododo has been elected as the governorship candidate of the All Progressives Congress, APC, in Kogi State. Secretary of the Kogi APC Primary Election Committee, Patrick Obahiagon, announced that Mr. Ododo scored 78,704 votes to beat 6 other contestants. According to Mr. Obahiagon, out of the 93,729 voters, 83,419 were accredited and took part in the exercise. Mr. Ododo was the former local government auditor general in Kogi State, and he is believed to be the preferred candidate of the state governor, Yahaya Bello. The deputy governor, Edward Onoja, and some other aspirants had recently withdrawn from the race after Governor Bello reportedly endorsed Mr. Ododo. The governorship election in Kogi is scheduled to hold on November 11th. In the meantime, leadership of the People's Democratic Party, PDP, has named former Kaduna State Governor Ahmed Makarfi as chairman of the Kogi State governorship primaries slated for tomorrow in Lokoja, the state capital. The exercise is to enable the party to pick a flag bearer for the November 11th governorship election in the state. In a brief statement by the PDP National Organizing Secretary Umar Bature, Loretta Oguche will serve as secretary of the 7-man committee, which also has Tony Mark, Ikechukwu Nwosu, Deolu Harrison, Usman Ibrahim, and Anthony Onwuka as members. The statement enjoins the committee to be guided strictly by the PDP Constitution, the electoral guidelines for party primary elections, and the 2022 Electoral Act. Meanwhile, former chairman of the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, Sam Amadi, has joined the race to pick the governorship ticket of the Labour Party in Imo State. In a statement today, Dr. Amadi said he was inspired to vie for the LP governorship ticket by the political leadership of the party's presidential candidate, Peter Obi. The LP governorship primary election in Imo is holding today. According to him, he believes the party under Mr. Obi offers the best opportunity to Imo people to throw away the shackles of corrupt and criminal leadership that started long ago. Dr. Amadi said receiving a lot of support from Imo people in all political parties has been an honor. He called on delegates to vote for him if they like his message, or vote for another person if they like their money. In other news, some health and well-being experts have expressed worries that the burden of drug abuse is becoming a public health concern in Nigeria, with many youths involved in the act. Recently, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crimes reported that over 11% of youth population in Nigeria take hard drugs. In this report, Joseph Atewe spoke to some youths and stakeholders on how to reduce or totally eradicate the menace. We will be bringing you the report on this particular news in our subsequent bulletins. At this time, you're watching News at 7 on Western Spring Television. Still to come. INEC and EFCC appoint 18 lawyers to prosecute electoral offenders. We will bring you more on this when we return.
War, also known as Ekiti Parappa War, was waged among Yoruba main ethnic groups which emerged from the ruins of the falling Oyo Empire that were desperate to replace the awesome powers hitherto wielded by the Alaafin of Oyo. The Kiriji War is defined as a conflict of confederacy and unitary political system championed by Yorubas of different socio-economic and political interests. The Ibadan military aristocrats felt they deserved a dominant position for saving Yoruba land from being totally submerged by the Fulanis by their victory in Oshobo War of 1840 and Ijaye War of 1862. Kiriji War, that took its name from the booming motor sounds of European arms festered for so long because the Industrial Revolution in Europe provoked high standards of slaves. The 16-year Civil War also caused the emergence of new powerful kingdoms like Ibadan and the rise of powerful personalities like Oluyole, Ogumola, Kuromi, Latosha, Shodeke, Fabumi, and Ogedengbe. One of the fallouts of Kiriji War was the birth of creative political and leadership structure in Yoruba land that was a blend of federalism and autocratic monarchical system. Western Spring Television identifies Kiriji War as a watershed event. Dramatist, playwright, and icon of Yoruba thematic arts, Duro Ladipo was born December 18, 1931 in Oshobo, southwest Nigeria. His clergyman father christened him Timothy. His other names, Duro Dola, Duro Shomo, Duro Rike, reflected his persona and the circumstances that surrounded his birth. The legendary stage actor had in several public fora identified himself as one of the greatest abikus born to die in this world. Family records reveal how he was born and died 13 times. The intertwining names he bore thus lent credence to his spiritism. Duro Ladipo was one of the best known and world-acclaimed Yoruba dramatists to emerge from post-colonial Africa. His notable works, Obakoso, Obawaja, and Moremi, took him beyond Africa to several parts of the world. By the time Duro Ladipo died on 11 March 1978, Nigeria's first cultural ambassador had acquired a towering image as an artist whose works adorned the frontage of Trenchard Hall, University of Ibadan. Western Spring Television identifies Duro Ladipo as a major character in history. The history of guns is traced to China. The Chinese had developed a technology civilization that produced devices identified as guns at about 1000 AD. By the end of the 13th century, the devices had become true guns and described as metal-barreled firearms that fired single projectiles which occluded the barrel. When did gun become an instrument of war? The first battles to be decided by firearms were between French and Spanish soldiers. The early 16th century warfare included Magnano in 1515, Bicocca in 1522, and Pavia in 1525. The wars were fought in Italy. The gun is a weapon of destruction and death, but humanity sees it as a potent instrument of family destruction. People with guns feel safer even if they don't display it. Western Spring Television identifies history of guns as a watershed event in history. Samuel Ladoke Akintola was a frontal figure in the historical moves that birthed an independent Nigeria from colonial Britain. As a freedom activist, he deployed his wits, energy, intellect, and oratory skills to prepare the grounds for constitutional talks that eventually culminated in the country's independence in 1960. The 13th Ààrẹ Ọ̀nà Kakanfò of Yoruba land cut his teeth as a politician when he became a foundation member of Action Group, the dominant political party in the Western region, and was elected the party's parliamentary leader of opposition at the Federal House of Representatives. The crisis in the Action Group, which pitched Samuel Ladoke Akintola against his leader, was not only a sore point in his colorful political life, but a reversal of gains which characterized the exemplary leadership of Awolowo Akintola premiership. 23 years after his death, Oyo State University of Technology Ogbomosho was renamed Samuel Ladoke Akintola University of Technology to keep his memory alive. Western Spring Television identifies Samuel Ladoke Akintola as a major character in history. The Korean War of 1950 to 1953 pitched North and South Korea against each other in response to intrigues by nations beyond their border with different interests from those canvassed by the two brother nations. The Korean War had all the nuances of an external conflict induced by powers that were interested in subjugating North and South Korea. Japan had leveraged on its military power to annex Korea in 1900 and imposed a military union that did not sit well with the citizens. Japan not only lost its war of conquest against Korea, all its powers were obliterated by the effect of the World War II. The end of World War II got Korea divided into two nations along 38 parallel lines by the instrumentality of the United States of America and the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic. The Korean War lapsed into a Cold War when it stopped the prying eyes of external forces into the internal affairs of a nation now divided along its north and southern territories. Western Spring Television identifies the Korean War as a major event in history.
Welcome back. We'll continue with more reports. The Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, and the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, have appointed 18 lawyers to prosecute electoral offenders. The commission has also appointed 2 senior advocates of Nigeria. The 18 lawyers, who are all legal officers of both INEC and the EFCC, will prosecute electoral offences relating to financial crimes arising from the 2023 general elections. Earlier, INEC said it was set to prosecute over 200 persons arrested for various electoral offences during the just concluded general elections. Already, the Nigeria Police Force transferred over 50 case files of electoral offences to the Electoral Empire. A coalition of civil society organizations has petitioned the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission, ICPC, and the Minister of Interior, Rauf Aregbesola, over the alleged move to extend the tenure of the Comptroller General of the Nigeria Immigration Service, Idris Jere. The CSOs, under the aegis of Transparency and Accountability Group, Center for Sustainable Dialogue, Center for Public Accountability and Transparency and Accountability Initiative, charged the ICPC and Mr. Aregbesola to investigate the alleged plot to extend the tenure of the NIS boss without recourse to due process. The petition, entitled "A Call for the Investigation and Prosecution of the Comptroller General of NIS," was signed on behalf of the CSOs by the National Coordinator of TAG, Comrade Ayo Ologun. According to the petition, the tenure of Acting Comptroller General statutorily ended on April 24, 2022, but by the decision of the President, his tenure was elongated by a year. The CSOs, which relied on the letter of extension as signed by the Chief of Staff to the President, said the one-year elongation ends on April 24, 2023, provided no further elongation is given, which the group said until this moment is non-existent. The coalition revealed that it can be rightly concluded that the acting CJ is to vacate office on or before April 24, 2023, and any action taken or processes embarked upon runs foul of the subsisting public law. The CSOs pointed to a letter issued from the Office of the Comptroller General to the effect of an official trip which stated that the CJ will be away from April 13th to April 25th when his tenure would have been duly and officially terminated. The group described it as an act of corruption as the question arises as to what capacity the CJ is returning to on April 25th, having exhausted his tenure by the 24th, and on whose bill the expenses of the extra day in office would be. Muslims have been reminded to reflect on the teachings of the Ramadan period in their daily dealings and also to nurture their children in the ways of the Almighty. This was an admonition made by Ustaz Musbaudin Orimadegun at the special Ramadan lecture held in honor of Pa Abdul Salam Oladosu Olapade, the father of member representing Ede North, Ede South, Egbedore, Ejigbo Federal Constituency as the House of Representatives. Bamidele Salam today in Awo, Egbedore local government area of Osun State. Olayinka Ale was there and completes the story. We'll be bringing you the video reel on this report in due course. Let's move on to the foreign scene. A past struggle between Sudan's army and paramilitaries has seen fighting erupt between armed factions in the capital, Khartoum, and other cities. Tensions have increased between the government and the powerful rapid support forces in recent days. The RSF says it controls key sites in the capital, but Sudan's leader and head of the military has rejected its claim. The African Union, leading Arab states, and the United States have called for an end to the fighting and the resumption of talks aimed at restoring a civilian government. Sudanese groups and the ruling military junta failed to reach an agreement last week on the handover of power.
كده القيادة ده مبنى الأمن نيران في كل حتة هناك كل الحتة دخافين لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله ذيك القيادة هنا دي كلها مستودعات بتاعت جيت فيول بتاع المطار يعني لكن لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله أغلب الضرب هناك على سايد القيادة.
In the meantime, former Sudanese Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok has made a statement in a video posted on his Facebook account. He says the exchange of fire must stop immediately and calls on the Sudanese people to stay strong. He asked the Sudanese people not to allow the drums of war to take over before issuing a plea to the international community to do their duty in finding a solution. Mr. Hamdok served from 2019 until he was ousted in the October 2021 coup before being reinstated again a month later. He resigned last year after long-running disagreements with the army. In Asia, Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida resumed campaigning today after being evacuated unharmed from the scene of an apparent smoke bomb blast. The incident in Wakayama came less than a year after the assassination of former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, which traumatized the country and forced a security shakeup for public officials. Mr. Kishida was in the city to deliver remarks in support of a ruling party candidate at a local port when a disturbance rippled through the crowd gathered to hear him speak. Footage from national broadcaster NHK showed the Prime Minister turning to look backwards as a person was detained by security and people moved away. Seconds later, a blast was heard and white smoke filled the air. Government officials said a 24-year-old man had been arrested on suspicion of obstruction of business. There was no immediate information on a potential motive. Kenya's first operational satellite was launched into orbit today by SpaceX rocket that took off from California, USA. The launch, originally scheduled for Monday night in the United States, was postponed several times this week due to bad weather. The SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket took off from the base at Vandenberg, California, before deploying several dozen satellites an hour later, including the Kenyan Nation 1. Designed and developed by a team of Kenyan researchers, the satellite is intended to provide data for agriculture and environmental monitoring in Kenya, much needed in the East African country, which is currently experiencing a historic drought. In a joint statement last week, the Kenyan Ministry of Defense and the Kenya Space Agency touted an important milestone that should boost Kenya's promising space economy.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ignition, engines full power, and liftoff of Transporter 7. Go Falcon, go Transporter.
Vehicles pitching downrange. Stage 1.
Uganda's Deputy Finance Minister Amos Lugolube has been arrested in connection with the misappropriation of iron roofing sheets meant for vulnerable people in the northeastern Karamoja region. He is now the second Ugandan minister to have been detained over the corruption scandal. It follows this week's court appearance by the minister for the region, Mary Gorati Kitutu, though she pleaded not guilty. It is reported that several other officials and politicians received consignments of some of the 14,500 iron roofing materials. Mr. Lugolube is reported to have received at least 600 iron sheets. Local media reported in March that he had used some for an animal shed on his farm, and the later printed photos indicating that the shed had its roof removed before the story broke. The government has been under pressure to arrest and charge more of the officials implicated in the scandal. President Yoweri Museveni, under pressure from the public to take action, earlier this week orders the ministers to return roofing sheets or pay back to government a cash equivalent. Still ahead, Nigeria's inflation rate rises to 22.04% in March 2023 compared to 21.91% in February. We have more on these and other business stories after this break. Just stay with us.
Herbert Macaulay, politician, nationalist, and journalist, was the first Nigerian to qualify as a civil engineer, surveyor, and architect. Born on November 14, 1864, Herbert Macaulay was the founder of Nigeria's National Democratic Party, the first political party in pre-independent Nigeria. Scholars of Nigeria's political history describe Herbert Macaulay as the intellectual bulldog of 19th century Nigerian nationalist movement, in deference to his qualities as founder and leader of two foremost political parties, Nigeria National Democratic Party (NNDP) and National Council of Nigerian Citizens (NCNC). His matchless versatility in party organization and control kept the British colonialists on their toes in the entire span of his active life. After his death on 7th May 1946, Herbert Macaulay remains a hero of his country, which recognized his anti-colonial struggles. Today, Nigeria's 10 naira coin bears his oval face and trademark mustache. Western Spring Television identifies Herbert Macaulay as a major character in history. Funmilayo Ransome Kuti was an educationist and advocate of women's rights. She was recognized for her vitriolic comments against colonial policy of taxation as it affected the Nigerian women. Bere, as fondly addressed by her women followers, Funmilayo championed the initiation of universal adult suffrage, which gave an unprecedented leeway for women to contest elective offices and power to exercise voting rights. Married to a foremost educationist and teacher, Israel Oladotun Ransome Kuti, the first president of Nigeria Union of Teachers, Funmilayo Ransome Kuti was the mother of children who inherited her spirit of activism. Olufela and Be Ololari, the former, a renowned musical legend. She was the first female student of Abeokuta Grammar School and the first female to own and drive a car in Nigeria. The award recipient of Member of Order of Nigeria MON and Lenin Peace Prize, was born on 25th October 1900 and was killed on 13th April 1978 by rampaging road soldiers in Lagos. Western Spring Television identifies Funmilayo Ransome Kuti as a watershed character in history. Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela was an anti-apartheid activist who gave his all for the elimination of what has been described as the world's most vicious rule of the unjust and man's inhumanity against man. He was born July 18, 1918 in Mvezo, South Africa. Educated and trained as a successful legal practitioner, he took up the gauntlet of a human activist against segregation by the minority white suprematists in South Africa. At the climax of his trial for treason, orchestrated by the minority South African government, the great crusader for democratic equality was prepared to pay the supreme sacrifice to establish majority rule in his native land. He told white jurists that if achieving freedom for his people was worth his life, he was prepared to die. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in Robben Island, described as the most notorious prison in the world. It was from this same prison that he came out as a free man to assume office as South Africa's first black president in 1994. Western Spring Television identifies Nelson Mandela as a watershed character in history. Born Jeremiah Oyeni Obafemi on March 6, 1905, Obafemi Awolowo was a prime architect of Nigeria's independence and most consummate advocate of free education and social welfare in Africa's most populous nation. Erudite politician, thinker, and philosopher, Awo was fondly addressed by associates and political colleagues, brought his unique attributes to bear on governance in the defunct Western region. He administered as leader of government business and the premier between 1955 and 1958. Obafemi Awolowo's premiership witnessed pioneering in multi-sectoral policy initiatives and execution. The Western region under his administration paraded several enviable records. First television station in Africa, first real estate in Nigeria, first high-rise building in Nigeria, first modern sports stadium in Nigeria, first agricultural settlement in Nigeria, first modern civil service secretariat in Nigeria, and first industrial estate in Nigeria. His face is on 100 naira denomination as a mark of honor for his distinguished services to his country. Western Spring Television identifies Obafemi Awolowo as a major character in history.
You're welcome back. Let's bring you up to speed on more reports. Some health and well-being experts have expressed worries that the burden of drug abuse is becoming a public health concern in Nigeria, with many youths involved in the act. Recently, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crimes reported that over 11% of youth population in Nigeria take hard drugs. In this report, Joseph Atewa spoke to some youths and stakeholders on how to reduce or totally eradicate the menace.
The current health situation of some Nigerian youths is worrisome, considering their engagement into hard drug abuses. According to the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crimes, over 11% of youth population in Nigeria take hard drugs like syrup, tramadol, cocaine, shisha mix, among others. Around 275 million people used drugs worldwide in the last year, while over 36 million people suffered from drug use disorders, according to the 2021 World Drug Report by UNODC. In Nigeria, there seems to be a massive increase in the past year, as 30.8% of youths in the country used drugs in the last year, with more than 10% ending up in rehabilitation centers. A psychiatric consultant, Dr. Benjamin Egunroti, explained to us the psychological effects of hard drug intake and how most times it leads to death after so much complications.
The bulky part of what you have in as the psychological impact of it is that it brings most of them to the hospital. You've been to the hospital one time or the other and you see them manifesting different kind of behavioral abnormalities.
According to findings, one of the most common reasons that teenagers begin experimenting with drugs and alcohol is that they are simply bored and have no deeper interests. They see drugs and alcohol as a pastime to be explored. According to a hard drug user like Bernard, he ventured into hard drug intake because it helps him relax and stay out of trouble.
For me, I don't think marijuana is drugs. I don't do other drugs or other synthetic drugs like Molly, Colorado, Tramadol, Refnol, Swino. I don't do stuff like that. The only thing I do is green grass. God's given green grass. For someone like me, I tend to be easily distracted. I tend to always lose focus, or I can't place my concentration on things. I'm not so most times when you see me calm, or when you see that somebody's shouting at me and I'm not responding, it's not because I don't respond. Sometimes it's because at that time already I have smoked weed. So I think for me, weed calms me down.
Many youths who spoke to us behind the scene echo the words of Bernard, saying it helps them to relax and stay out of trouble. Dr. Egunroti strongly disagrees, saying that with his experience in the job, many of these youths who have made this ugly act a habit end up committing crimes like robbery, gang raping, and physical assault on people due to the bad effects of the drugs.
The money they are giving them at home, once they have exhausted that, they go into one crime or the other. I've seen cases of people that will take toy gun to go and rob in school simply because you want to satisfy your satiety for drug. I have seen people that will sell virtually everything that they have, including their phone, because they want their phone, their books, their this. They are in school, but they won't attend school. I have seen people that will stop paying school fees simply because they want to buy a drug or they want to pay for the one that they have bought already. We are not talking about all these mild psychoactive drugs. We are talking about all those big stuff that you pay through your nose to buy them.
Just recently, the chairman and chief executive officer, National Drug Law Enforcement Agency (NDLEA), Mohammed Mawa, said the agency has secured 3,733 convictions of drug dealers in 24 months. In Osun State, the assistant chief commandant of the agency, Ibrahim Yusuf, says the command has been on its toes to put an end to this growing trend. He also disclosed that at the end of 2022, the agency had seized and destroyed 75.36 kg of various kinds of drugs, with many arrests made.
We have been doing, we are equally moving alongside with them as they are discovering new means. We are equally devising our operational strategy to counter it.
Report states that the earlier young people start using drugs, the greater the chances of continuing to use them and become addicted later in life. Taking drugs when one is young can contribute to the development of adult health problems such as disease, high blood pressure, kidney failure, cancer, among others. Treating many of these diseases costs millions of naira, with many families having to sell their properties to treat their loved ones who have failed to listen to simple corrections. Youths have now been advised to desist from this ugly act as the consequences are always brutal later in life. Joseph Atewe, Western Spring Television News.
And now to business. Nigeria's inflation rate rose to 22.04% in March 2023, compared to the February 2023 headline inflation rate, which was 21.91%. According to the National Bureau of Statistics Consumer Price Index report released today, the March 2023 inflation rate showed an increase of 0.13 percentage points when compared to February 2023 headline inflation rate. The Bureau acknowledged the increase in the prices of food and non-alcoholic beverages, housing, water, electricity, gas and other fuel, clothing and footwear, and transport. The NBS said the increase in prices of the above contributed to the rise of the country's inflationary figure. Governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Godwin Emefiele, says regulators in Nigeria will continue to keep their eyes on banking system stability through monitoring and supervision of financial institutions. Mr. Emefiele said this during an interview with journalists on the sidelines of the ongoing International Monetary Fund World Bank Spring meetings in Washington, D.C. This follows the recent collapse of Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank in the United States, but heightened concerns of a likely global banking crisis. The CBN governor pointed out that the support of CBN's tight monetary policy by the IMF was a testament to the fact that the central bank was doing the right thing. Commenting on the general overview of the spring meetings, which ends today, Mr. Emefiele noted that the focus of the gathering of policymakers across the globe was to proffer solutions to food crisis, rising poverty, and global inflation, as well as other pertinent issues. According to him, food insecurity has risen quite tremendously to the extent that over 350 million people globally are hit by extreme food crisis. He also noted that the rise in global debt was causing a funding squeeze, adding that multilateral organizations were becoming reluctant to lend to countries in need of loans. Ebonyi State Governor David Umahi has approved the creation of the Ministry of Aviation and Technology in the state. A statement by the Secretary to the State Government and Coordinating Commissioner, Kenneth Igwe, said the move is to provide good governance and effective service delivery to the people of the state. He disclosed that Obianojo Alo has been appointed as the Special Advisor to the Governor on Aviation and Technology. He added that the new ministry will provide the administrative and quality framework to streamline and strengthen the smooth takeoff of Ebonyi State aviation system. You're welcome to sports. Wiki Tourist Football Club of Bauchi have appealed to the interim management committee to review the sanctions against the club over the 2022-2023 Nigeria Professional Football League between the club and Bayelsa United FC. The March Day 13 fixture between Wiki Tourist FC and Bayelsa United at Abubakar Tafawa Balewa Stadium, Bauchi, on April 9th was characterized by irregularities. The IMC, in its penalties after a review of the match, imposed 3 points and goals deduction on Wiki Tourist, a 2.5 million naira fine, and orders the stadium closed to all NPFL matches. Reacting, chairman of Wiki Tourist FC, Balarabe Douglas, said the IMC accused Wiki management of not providing adequate security, throwing objects in the field, and assaulting match officials of the match. He said the management provided adequate security for the match with over 40 security personnel. In England, Ollie Watkins continued his prolific form with 2 goals as Aston Villa boosted their European hopes with an emphatic 3-0 victory over Newcastle, whose 5-match winning run came to a shuddering halt at Villa Park. The former Brentford striker completed a one-sided victory with 8 minutes remaining, converting a low shot by a slight deflection of Newcastle defender Kieran Trippier. Unai Emery's team dominated the early stages and took the lead when Jacob Ramsey swept Watkins' cushioned header low into the net. Watkins almost scored inside 30 seconds when he struck the foot of the post after shrugging off Sven Botman's challenge. Manchester United will advance Newcastle into third if they avoid defeat at Nottingham Forest on Sunday.
Good afternoon. Very thankful, firstly, with the supporters, because today was amazing their help. And of course, we tried knowing it was a very difficult match. Our game plan, really, the players was very focused to do. And we played being consistent 90 minutes. Offensively, defensively, we didn't consider only one corner. And this is the team who more corners they had for them in this season, and really was another challenge we had before the match. And then I think we have to be as well in good balance, not thinking after this victory it's going to be easy, completely different. It's going to be very difficult, because now our new target, really new target, and of course, because we deserve it, is the more difficult. But this challenge I want to take with the players.
In the first half, you had so many chances. Was there a concern that you hadn't done enough to put the game to bed, to finish it off?
When we were speaking in the half time about the first half, was completely everybody sure.
19-year-old Julian Cesar scored a stunning winner as Brighton came from behind to beat Chelsea in the Premier League in Frank Lampard's first home match since being reappointed Blues manager. The Paraguayan forward blasted into the top corner from 35 yards to help Brighton continue their European qualification push. Substitute Danny Welbeck had levelled at Stamford Bridge after corner Gallagher's deflected strike gave Chelsea a fortunate lead. Brighton remained 7th in the table and Chelsea 11th. Meanwhile, Dango Ouattara scored an injury-time winner as Bournemouth boosted their Premier League survival hopes with a stunning 3-2 victory at Tottenham. Elsewhere, Eberechi Eze struck twice as Crystal Palace won their 3rd consecutive game and left wasteful Southampton rooted to the bottom of the Premier League table. Eze was the catalyst for Palace as he scored from a rebound after Jordan Ayew's strike was pumped into his path by homekeeper Gavin Bazunu. His second goal saw him turn away from his defender and arrow a precise finish into the bottom corner. Away from football, the United States won figure skating season-ending World Team Trophy, tightening their strangleholds on the event with a record fifth title. Ilya Malinin helped the Americans clinch the gold on 120 points, comfortably clear of South Korea on 95 and Japan on 94. The US have now won the event, which is held in Japan every 2 years, more than half of the 8 times it has been staged. Russia, who won the competition 2 years ago, were banned from defending the title because of the war in Ukraine. And that's all at this hour. But before we go, here is a recap of our major stories. The Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, today conducted supplementary elections for 2 governorship seats and 93 legislative seats across 24 states of the Federation amidst voter apathy and seeming violence. The Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, and the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, have appointed 18 lawyers to prosecute electoral offenders. Nigeria's inflation rate rose to 22.04% in March 2023 compared to the February 2023 headline inflation rate, which was 21.91%. Finally, we brought you news on the foreign scene that a power struggle between Sudan's army and paramilitaries has seen fighting erupt between armed factions in the capital, Khartoum, and other cities. Please do follow us on our social media handles on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Western Spring Television. You can also watch us live on our YouTube channel at Western Spring Television. Thank you indeed for watching the news at 7. I am Damilola Raphael. To have a restful evening.
Samuel Laduke Akintola was a frontal figure in the